Hello, Hannah.
Hello, Rachel. How are you doing? How's
I'm
Dennis?
fine. Dennis wanted to join you, so there you go.
Yeah, we
He's
always
a
need
rank,
some Dennis.
he's a rank amateur compared to Eagle. I always say Eagle's much more of a menace. So,
In this house, Dennis is the peacemaker.
oh yeah. If you look to your left, your face goes black because of the sun. So just be aware.
Yeah, I noticed that. I'm trying not to move very much, but I can't because of the charger.
Oh, bless you. So, what is Hannah? Who is Hannah?
What is Hannah? Oh, that's a very good question. A lot of people have been trying to figure that out since I started CAMS. And I don't think they've quite got the answer yet. I may be one of those eternal mysteries. Although I like to think I'm some combination of a reborn vampire cross with a elven shapeshifter that just got lost along the way and found themselves in a human body that they're not too sure how to figure out yet.
So for us, perfectly normal, Hannah.
Normal, absolutely, perfectly normal. Even when I'm dressed as if I should be either going off to terrorize someone in a haunted house.
So, does Hannah go to work? Do you have a job, Hannah?
Life, unfortunately, has meant I do not work. I am currently on benefits, which I am a proud benefit scrounger. I reclaim that name for myself. Whenever someone asks me, what is my job? I will say, I am a proud benefit scrounger, and I will take as much money from the government as I can, because if they are handing out massive pay packets to those people who just fall asleep in the benches, well, why don't they pay me to fall asleep in a nice comfy bed? Yeah. At least they're not having to pay for my champagne.
Well, you're definitely not a scrounger, Hannah, are you? So you have challenges in your life, don't you?
I do. I am autistic. I am very proudly autistic, and I am also proudly disabled. I am hypermobile, which means an added layer of fatigue and aches and pains, but it doesn't stop me from moving. Doesn't stop me from dancing either. I do Morris dancing, I have done belly dancing, I also do freestyle, and I am currently starting to do industrial, though that is currently something, it's easy to do standing in one place and listening to the kind of music I very much enjoy, and just completely dancing as if the world isn't there.
So, talking about dancing, what's your first track?
First track, that would be Melanie Martinez's Orange Juice. Now, okay. It's not a goth track. You could describe that as pop, but there's a layer of depth and meaning to it that is surprising. It is a surprising song, and the first time I listened to it, I cried. And that was because the name isn't very obvious at first, but it's about eating disorders, bulimia in particular, but also binging disorders, anorexia, looking at how beauty standards are forced on particularly young women and often by their peers, and the sad fact of women being complicit in their own oppression and their own suppression of their independence and self-confidence, which is a shame. But in a way, this song confronts that in a very sympathetic and empathetic way that I've never seen before. Instead of saying, oh, don't listen to the haters, don't do this, don't do that, they're saying, no, these people are suffering just as much from low self-esteem, from the same pressures we all face. It's wrong, and they are wrong, but they are not the problem. They are a symptom of the problem.
Beings. They're human beings.
They're human beings. And the name Orange Juice is an allusion to people who have bulimia, who throw up.
And have you had an eating disorder, Hannah?
I have had eating disorder. I have several eating disorders. I have had binge and starve eating disorders, which is a subtype of bulimia, which is why this song is particularly not painful, but cathartic. It's a cathartic song, and it forces you to confront those really painful urges that you get.
Yeah.
I have a lot of anxiety around food, which isn't entirely eating disorder related. It is autism related, but it is something that I constantly have to remind myself that it doesn't define me. And when you're involved in a lot of dancing and fashion and things that are very appearance based, it is so hard to fall into this vicious cycle of looking at food as your enemy rather than something that you need.
It's the one thing you cannot avoid. You can avoid alcohol.
You can avoid alcohol.
Cigarettes.
Yep, but you can't avoid food.
Well, you can, but like not with great results. There's enough evidence to prove that that's not a good thing.
And I've done it, and I've seen the results, and I have issues because I've done it. I now struggle with severe head rushes because my body was so put out of balance because of it. I have to be really careful when I stand up because my blood pressure just drops so quickly. I have to be careful to take all my nutrients in because my body isn't.
The good news, Hannah, is how old are you?
I am 24.
Wow, what a great age. The good news
24.
is I also used to have an eating disorder a long time ago, mine, and I now am comfortable in my skin.
Yeah,
and so
it takes
hope.
time.
It does take time. And as women, we are much more judged on our appearance than men.
And especially if you're non-binary, because I am non-binary as well, which means I identify as both male and female and neither. So I sit somewhere in between. And that, coupled with the expectation that to be androgynous, you must be thin, you must be white, because we can't deny the level of white representation within non-binary communities, but thin, you have to be so thin to be considered non-binary and androgynous, that if you are a tall curvy, if you have hips, if you have larger breasts, your identity is often invalidated, and it perpetuates this air of fat shaming and body shaming, and in a way this song calls that out. It calls it out by saying everyone wants what the other has.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to work what another is working, and it's saying, actually, you're not alone in this. You're not alone in feeling like this, but your skin is your skin, and it's the only one you're going to get.
Yep. So what's your next
there's no point wasting your time with the next song. Well, the next song is one I listen to when all of that depressing stuff and all of the things that people will pull you down over, particularly as I'm involved in politics. I am part of the Labour Party. We like the Labour Party, but I'm also part of AWL, which is Alliance for Workers' Liberty, and they do amazing work. They're still a fairly small organisation, but they are I would say they sit between communist and socialist, and they take a more holistic approach to a lot of these issues. Instead of just being pure economics and pure communist, they go, no, there are social issues that need to be taken into consideration. And the one song that always pulls me out of the doldrums of we're losing, the government, we're never going to win, is Billy Bragg's Red Flag.
Go Billy!
Billy Bragg is the one person, the one singer who if I know I'm having a bad day, or I've had a really depressing moment when the news just is pulling me down into a slough of despair, Billy Bragg is the one person that goes, no, you're in it for the fight. You joined for the fight. This is not a battle that we're going to win quickly, but if we don't fight, we're never going to win. We need the energy to keep going, even though it's hard, even though it hurts. If you don't fight, you are letting them win, and they want you not to fight.
Oh yeah.
And it's the one song that I always come back to, and it reminds me that I'm not alone, that solidarity is the end goal of leftism. It is the end goal of socialism. It is the end goal of communism. I think sometimes we forget that, and we let we can't see the wood for the trees. It is a good political framework, but in the end, it's how we relate to other human beings. It's not about always smashing the state and very material revolution. It's often about how we revolutionize the way we see other human beings. And if any artist embodies that supreme humanity, it's Billy Bragg.
Oh, I love Billy Bragg. I'm with you there all the way, Hannah. So I think for me, though, the answer's not really in parliamentary politics. One of the good things to have come out of the virus is people smile at each other more. You may be 6 foot apart, but somebody will smile at you.
And they will wave.
People offer to help people.
And there is a massive groundswell of anarchist work, and I have never been so proud to be a self-proclaimed anarchist. I am so fucking proud of the people who are getting involved. I am so fucking proud of the people who often have felt so powerless, so unable to get into politics, because it is very hard to get into politics. I had to know someone. To get involved. And I was one of the lucky ones. I have the time to do this. For many people, they just don't have the time. But this crisis has given people the chance to go, no, I can do something. I can make masks. I'm going to be making masks today. I have been cooking. I will make you one. I have lots of spooky fabric that I can make masks out of. But I have offered my services to Sierra, the people who have cared for me over 8 years. 8 years. And they had their PPE equipment taken by the government. And I said, you know what? This is not fair. You have cared for me for so long. It's time I give a little bit back. And so I have been putting together a whole load of fabric, ripping up old t-shirts, old bed sheets to make masks for the care workers who are going from door to door to door, and often with long hours. They are often by themselves, and they are dealing with some of the most vulnerable people of our community, people within the community who are so often neglected, and who the rhetoric around their very existence, especially during coronavirus, has been one of complete disposability. But they're not disposable.
I'm surprised they haven't asked you to do a DNR, Hannah.
I'll be honest with you, I went into self-quarantine 2 weeks before they put out the official lockdown, because I saw what was happening and I didn't trust what they were going to do. And I knew that if I was going to get it, there would likely be something like that, because I've known a lot of people being pressured into this, and this is not just with coronavirus. There's a lot of disabled people who are already being pressured into DNR contracts just simply because they're not deemed useful to society. And that mode of thinking, that capitalistic mode of thinking, suffuses everything. But the one thing I have noticed is as soon as people see that they can contribute something, they will not ask for a price for it. They will just give it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're
So
right, Hannah.
I firmly refute.
So I've heard you say many times over the years that you feel like capitalism and the state
You've frozen
are
on me.
trying to get rid of Hannah and people like you and people with difficulties. And I think
Yeah.
I speak for most of my friends in that look at what you give, look at the art you do, the dancing you do, the involvement you have. And like you said, you know, you're instantly saying there's a need, I'm going to meet that need. You're not somebody who is worthless. And as somebody who's worked with people who can't speak and are quadriplegic, I'm offended that the state sees them as less than worthy because they can't walk.
Yeah.
We should never judge. Einstein once said we should never judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree because it will always be found wanting. And so, you know,
but the problem is a lot of people have just assumed that to be human is to be selfish. I will absolutely fight the Ayn Randian idea that to be human is a fight of the fittest, of survival of the fittest. No, it's the survival of community. It is the survival of empathy. It is the survival of handing your heart out and trusting. Are you going to get bitten? Absolutely. But if we were scared of getting bitten every time we walked out the door, we would never walk out the fucking door.
Well said, Hannah. So what's your last track?
My last track is one that's a little bit more personal, and it's more kind of along the lines of how I came to look as spooky as I do. And it is
Beautiful.
City of Fire. It is City of Fire by Susie Sue. Susie Sue and the Banshees. It is the first classic goth song that I listened to before becoming goth. And it is a song that reminds me of the transience and the fragility of humanity. But also, it reminds me that the vastness of the planet we are on, and it keeps me humble. It reminds me that death is never far away. It reminds me that someday someone will be digging up my bones. It reminds me that all is ash in the end, but ashes are beautiful. Ashes can conceal something very precious, but they are also deadly and painful. And accepting that pain, accepting that horror, is the most beautiful thing you can do for your soul. And Susie Sue captures that in a way that you have to really listen to her to understand what she's saying. And the song itself is about Pompeii, and it's about the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. And it talks about how ash flowing into your lungs, petrifying you from the inside out, about lava flowing around and burning towns, about massive plumes of darkness. And you feel very small. And you're reminding that humans aren't that powerful, that we must respect nature, that we are not as masterful of the world as we like to assume. And it definitely makes you consider the illusions that capitalism likes to put you under.
Yeah. And you normally live alone, and I suppose when lockdown started, you were one of the people I was a little bit concerned about, because being a goth,
Yes.
You're not really known for going to sit in the park and getting sunshine, are you, ma'am?
No, I did midnight walks around the graveyard. Quarantine tip: if you want walks, go walk around a graveyard. No one will bother you.
Just don't take
no one will bother you. No,
don't take a spade.
Don't take a spade, but dress in all black, long veil. No one will bother you.
So you're not living on your own at the moment. Where are you living?
I am currently with my grandma.
Yep.
I reached week 6 and I realised that it was going to take more than sertraline to keep me on the rails. um, it was going to take a lot, and I was finding that I was unable to even get out of bed, and I was really struggling. I had poured so much into supporting other people that I knew that I just physically couldn't do anything to look after myself. I was struggling to eat. I was struggling to take care of myself. And I had a few friends say, we're worried about you. Can we come over? But the anxiety of giving someone coronavirus, even though I had been in lockdown before the lockdown was actually called, the anxiety of that was so high, particularly as a lot of people I know are key workers. They are people who are working and serving the community. The idea that I could potentially give them something was, I didn't know if I could forgive myself if I did that. So I reached week 6 and I did have mum and I did have some other people bring me food, but I got to a point where all I wanted. Am I back?
Yes. Well, I can hear you, but I can see a weird picture.
I am back. I'm very sorry. I am very sorry.
Don't worry.
Internet seems to be a bit weird, but I suppose that's because everyone is on it. Going back to what we were saying, I had food deliveries, but I wasn't eating it. Food was going rotten. I had no motivation. Even though I had a lot of things to do, I did, however, manage to do a lot of cross stitch. And in that very reflective, highly depressive state, I realized if I don't get out, this is going to kill me.
Yes.
This is going to kill me.
So good old Grandma Pat.
And so Grandma was also living alone, and she was struggling, and we were both struggling emotionally. Although she was doing better as she has a garden. I live in a landlorded flat. I live in a rented flat. The garden is communal, so thus it's off limits. I wasn't allowed to foster. I had put in a request to the landlord to see if I could foster a cat or a box of kittens because it's currently kitten season. The shelter would get me all the stuff I needed. I would get blankets. The only difficulty would be washing them. But I would likely send them off to grandma's to be washed. But I was told no, because no pets allowed. Despite the fact that it's a quarantine and despite the fact that guarantees that I wouldn't be keeping the foster kittens, I would just be looking after them and making sure that they were fed. But unfortunately,
and that's what you need, isn't it? You need a purpose.
Yeah, and you need a connection. The problem is that for a lot of people, if you're living alone, they may actually have a dog or a cat or something living that they can attach themselves to. If you don't have that, there is enough studies done on solitary confinement prisoners to show how detrimental and how torturous it is to be by yourself. We're social animals. We're social animals. We're not meant to be.
And that's why, I think that's why, sadly, Hannah, they say the death toll from the loneliness will possibly be higher than the death toll from coronavirus.
Absolutely
I think we just need to say to people out there that if you are struggling like you were, you need to reach out. You need to reach out and get help, and either do this video call or.
Well, sometimes you can do a video call, but there are times when, if you are really struggling, talk about moving in with someone. Communal living at the moment is your best shot. Now, the way I did it is I did not go out for 2 weeks at all. I did not accept any new food. I made sure that my house was sterilized. Everything was clean. And then Grandma came over in a clean car and we moved the bags. There was no other contact. And we were fine.
Your
we just
grandma
had to be
is wonderful.
It was a quarantine inside a quarantine, but it was worth it. And I've known a couple of friends who have done the same because they themselves are very very much struggling with the quarantine. And
Bless
it's
your
a lot
heart.
hard, and it's a lot harder for girls, and it's a lot harder for people who are young, who have mental health difficulties, who don't have a job, because having a job can often give you a purpose, but when you don't, it's very hard.
Yeah, bless you. Well, Hannah, we'll let you go. Thank you for coming on to our Desert Island Vids. I've been on to H as normal. So, but we love you.
Well,
and
I now have to go join my Marks study group. I'll see you later.
Go for your life. Bye, Hannah. Love you.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.